February 15th, 1995. The FBI's elite cyber task force dials headquarters from a secure line to report they've cornered their target. But the phone line isn't secure. Kevin Mitnick is recording every word. One college dropout with a cloned cell phone against 150 federal agents, unlimited resources, and the full weight of American law enforcement. While tactical teams plan their raid in Raleigh, Mitnick sits in his apartment listening to their conversations in real time. He knows their positions, their timelines, the names of their wives. For 913 days, he's turned the Manhunt into performance art, tapping FBI phones, intercepting their emails, leaving digital breadcrumbs that lead nowhere. They're not hunting him. He's studying them. But Mitnick doesn't know that one man he humiliated on Christmas has just cracked his location. What Mitnick can't see through all his surveillance is that the real trap is using channels he doesn't even know exist. Unbeknownst to him, they've gone dark, and the net is tightening. How does a hacker outsmart the FBI using their own technology? And what happens when the ultimate mind game finally ends? What Kevin didn't know yet was that his greatest strength would become his fatal weakness. But first, we need to understand how he became untouchable. To understand how Kevin got here, we need to go back to 1983. He's 12 years old, Los Angeles, and he's just figured out something that will define his entire life. People are easier to hack than computers. The target, LA's bus system. Kevin wants free rides. But instead of sneaking on or jumping turnstiles, he does something brilliant. He calls the bus company's main office, pretends to be a student doing a school project, and asks how their punch card system works. The employee explains everything: the card stock they use, where they buy it, how the punch patterns work. 3 days later, Kevin's riding every bus in LA for free with perfectly replicated punch cards. Not a single line of code, not a single computer touched. Just a phone call and some confidence. That's social engineering, and Kevin Mitnick would become the greatest social engineer in history. Here's the psychological trick that made it work. People are hardwired to trust confident voices with specific questions. The employee had no reason to doubt a curious student. Kevin wasn't breaking rules. He was exploiting belief. But here's what Kevin didn't know yet. This childhood trick was teaching him a method that would eventually make him the FBI's most wanted. The answer to how was still years away. First, though, he had to perfect it. By his early 20s, Mitnick had turned this talent into an obsession. He didn't want money. He wanted access. He wanted to prove he could get into any system, anywhere, anytime. Between 1980 and 1995, he infiltrated 40 major corporations: Motorola, Nokia, Sun Microsystems, Fujitsu. Corporations claimed $300 million in damages. The actual direct loss? Just $300,000. Think about that number. 40 corporations, 15 years, $300,000 in damages. This wasn't cybercrime for profit. This was performance art. But here's what terrified the authorities. Kevin wasn't exploiting software bugs or writing sophisticated malware. He was exploiting something far more fundamental and far more dangerous: human trust. He'd call a receptionist at Nokia, claim to be from IT, say he needed to verify some security credentials. 5 minutes later, he's inside their network. Or he'd befriend a low-level employee at Motorola, learn about their security protocols over drinks, then use that insider knowledge to walk right through their digital front door. Here's the psychological weakness he exploited. People are programmed to trust authority figures and help colleagues. A confident voice claiming to be from IT triggers automatic compliance. Kevin wasn't breaking security systems. He was hacking human nature. You could spend $50 million on firewalls and encryption. Kevin would defeat you with a $2 phone call. And that's what made him the FBI's most wanted. Not what he stole, what he proved. that every security system in America was built on a foundation of human psychology, and humans could be hacked. But here's the insane part. Kevin took it further, way further. What he did next would turn the hunters into the hunted, but they had no idea what was coming. In 1992, Kevin gained control of Pacific Bell's network. Not just access, control. He could monitor any phone line in California, route calls wherever he wanted, and he used this power to do something absolutely audacious. He tapped the FBI agents investigating him. While federal law enforcement planned their strategy to catch Kevin Mitnick was listening to every word. He knew which leads they were following, which informants they were talking to, which cities they thought he was hiding in. Little did they know he'd turned their own surveillance operation inside out. One FBI agent's frustrated report would later read, "He's always 3 steps ahead. It's like he knows what we're going to do before we do it." They had no idea Kevin was literally listening to them plan his capture while they spoke. And Kevin, he couldn't resist twisting the knife. He left a box of fresh donuts in his own refrigerator, labeled FBI donuts, for the agents to find during their raid. No note, no explanation, just donuts. Kevin had anticipated their search and left them breakfast as a joke. The message was clear: I'm watching you watch me. For 913 days, this was Kevin's world, a game where he held every advantage, where the hunters were his entertainment. But what happened next would change everything. Here's where it gets interesting. What Kevin didn't understand was that making powerful people look foolish has consequences. And the person he was about to humiliate wouldn't just report him to authorities. He'd become obsessed. December 25th, 1994, Christmas Day. While most of America is opening presents, Kevin Mitnick is breaking into the computer system of a researcher at the San Diego Supercomputer Center. The researcher's name is Tsutomu Shimomura. And Kevin just made the worst mistake of his life. Shimomura wasn't some corporate IT manager. He was a computational physicist, a genuine genius who'd worked on classified government projects. His specialty? Computer security at the deepest technical level. When Shimomura discovered the intrusion that Christmas afternoon, Kevin had already stolen thousands of files, security tools, personal emails, research data, a complete violation. But here's what nobody expected. Shimomura didn't just report it, he became obsessed. A colleague would later say, "I've never seen him like this." It wasn't just professional. Kevin had gotten inside his head. Here's the psychological weakness Kevin had exploited without knowing it: ego. Shimomura wasn't just a security expert. He was someone who prided himself on being unhackable. Kevin had shattered that identity on Christmas Day. It exploited a fundamental human truth. We defend our self-image more fiercely than our possessions. This wasn't about the stolen files. This was about being humiliated, being proven vulnerable, having someone reach into his digital life and take whatever they wanted. Shimomura dropped everything. He called the FBI. He called a New York Times journalist named John Markoff, who'd been covering Mitnick for years, and he told them both the same thing. "I'm going to find him." But here's the thing. Kevin didn't understand about making it personal. Corporate security teams work 9 to 5. They follow protocols. They have budgets and approval processes and bureaucracy. Shimomura had none of that. He had expertise, unlimited motivation, and a direct line to the FBI. The perfect storm was forming, and Kevin had no idea. Unbeknownst to Kevin, the trap was already being designed, but it would take weeks to build. Markoff's articles in the New York Times started building the mythology. He described Mitnick as a cyber terrorist, a threat to national security. The stories escalated from there. Prosecutors would claim Kevin could start a nuclear war by whistling into a payphone. Absurd, but it worked. Public pressure mounted. Resources flooded in. The hunt for Kevin Mitnick became a national priority. Meanwhile, Shimomura was developing something new: a way to track cellular phone signals with unprecedented precision. See, Kevin was using cloned cell phones to stay mobile and anonymous. Every time he connected to the internet, he used a different number, a different location, bouncing his signal to avoid detection. But here's what Kevin didn't know. Shimomura realized he didn't need to track the number. He needed to track the signal itself. And in January 1995, while Kevin continued to intercept FBI communications and feel invincible, Shimomura picked up something, a pattern, a unique cellular signature that kept appearing in different cities. The signal had characteristics that matched the equipment Kevin would need to run his operations. Shimomura started tracking it, city to city, state to state. By February, he'd narrowed it to Raleigh, North Carolina. The irony was almost poetic. Kevin had spent years exploiting cellular technology to stay invisible. Now that same technology was about to expose him. But that's not the scary part. February 13th, 1995. Shimomura arrives in Raleigh with a van full of tracking equipment. The FBI is coordinating with him now, but they're using separate communication channels. Encrypted channels. Channels Kevin doesn't have access to. Because while Kevin is listening to FBI field offices make decoy plans and chase false leads, the real operation is happening in silence. They'd gone dark. Unbeknownst to Kevin, every conversation he's intercepting is theater. The real hunters have gone dark. Over the next 48 hours, Shimomura drives through Raleigh neighborhoods with directional antennas, triangulating the cellular signal. He's narrowing it down, block by block, building by building. What Kevin didn't realize was that the very technology he'd exploited for years, cellular phone systems, was about to betray him. And that's when everything changed. February 15th, 6 a.m. Shimomura has the location, an apartment complex, Building 4, Unit 202. FBI tactical teams position themselves. Not the agents Kevin's been monitoring. Different teams, silent protocols. At this exact moment, Kevin Mitnick is in his apartment, listening to FBI communications on his cloned cell phone. They're talking about leads in Seattle, about possible sightings in Chicago. He's drinking coffee, feeling secure, feeling untouchable. Little did he know that outside his door, 150 federal agents are taking positions. The dramatic irony is almost painful. The man who'd built his entire legend on knowing what his hunters were doing is completely blind to the trap that's already closed around him. At 11:30 a.m., there's a knock on the door. Kevin Mitnick, the FBI's most wanted cyber fugitive, the man who'd outsmarted federal law enforcement for 913 days, answers. He's wearing a bathrobe. One FBI agent would later recall, he seemed genuinely shocked. For the first time, Kevin Mitnick hadn't seen it coming. No dramatic chase, no final hack, just a knock and a bathrobe. The irony? Shimomura would say, he was caught using the same cellular technology he'd exploited for years. Kevin was smiling as they led him out. He wouldn't be for long. But the real punishment was about to begin, and it had nothing to do with his actual crimes. Kevin Mitnick was held in solitary confinement for 8 months. Why? Prosecutors convinced a judge he was so dangerous that he could start a nuclear war by whistling into a payphone. Let that sink in. Solitary confinement for 8 months. Based on the claim that he could whistle nuclear launch codes, theater, security theater. The kind of absurd overreaction that happens when the establishment realizes it's been made to look foolish. The total financial damage from Kevin's 15-year hacking spree? $300,000. People who commit securities fraud causing millions in damages get house arrest. Kevin got solitary for proving that human psychology was a security vulnerability. He was eventually sentenced to 46 months in federal prison, plus 22 additional months for violating previous supervised release terms. Nearly 5 years for crimes that caused less damage than a single mid-level embezzlement case. But here's what nobody expected. The hacker community rallied. The Free Kevin movement spread across the early internet. Bumper stickers, websites, protests. Because other hackers understood what Kevin had really been punished for. Not what he stole, what he proved. That every security infrastructure in America, government, corporate, military, was fundamentally vulnerable because it relied on people, and people could be manipulated. Kevin was released in January 2000. He was forbidden from using the internet without supervision, forbidden from touching a computer. The judge treated a keyboard like a weapon. But that's not what terrifies them anymore. What happened next would shock everyone. Today, Kevin Mitnick runs his own security consulting firm. The companies that once hunted him now pay him millions to do exactly what he did before. Find their vulnerabilities. Test their employees. Prove that their security systems don't work. The establishment that imprisoned him for exposing their weaknesses now hands him seven-figure contracts to expose those same weaknesses. Because they finally realized something Kevin knew in 1983 when he was 12 years old, riding buses for free. Your biggest security vulnerability isn't your technology, it's your people. And 40 years later, that hasn't changed. Kevin Mitnick proved you can spend billions on firewalls, encryption, and security protocols. But your receptionist will still give the password to someone who sounds authoritative on the phone. It exploits a fundamental human truth. We're programmed to trust confidence and authority. No amount of training fully overrides that instinct. That's his legacy, not the 913 days on the run, not the FBI manhunt, not even outsmarting the entire federal law enforcement apparatus. His legacy is proving that the game was never about technology. It was always about psychology, and that's the game that can never be won. Because you can patch software, you can upgrade systems, you can build better firewalls, but you can't patch human nature. Kevin Mitnick didn't just outsmart the FBI. He exposed the lie at the heart of every security system. That technology could protect us from ourselves. The hunter became the hunted, who became the teacher. And the lesson is still being ignored. Your system isn't secure. It never was. And the person who proves it next might not be as harmless as Kevin.